Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael, in today for Fran Stoddard. And for this month's Bird Notes program, we're going to talk and learn about some of Vermont's early arrivals. Joining us from the Audubon Center in Huntington is our bird expert and conservation biologist, Mark Labar. Good afternoon, Mark. Always good to see you.
Always good to see you too, Will.
Now, this is the time of year we're starting to see, and we're certainly starting to hear, the first spring arrivals. It's the beginning of the summer breeding season. But we have an important update that you want to share with us, some updates about the avian flu that people have been hearing about.
Yeah, so just really quickly, there has been confirmed avian influenza here in the state in a couple of bald eagles, and the state Fish and Wildlife is monitoring this potential outbreak. Avian flu is, it's really contagious in poultry and waterfowl, and oftentimes in wild birds, it can be carried without causing disease or even with minor effects to those birds. So it is also a low risk for human transmission for people getting it. That said, if you find a bird that's sick or dead, it's best to just leave it alone. Rehabilitation centers are not accepting any injured birds at this point in time. So unfortunately, you have to let nature take its course. And what the state really would like to hear information is things like hawks and owls, loons or eagles, if they're found sick or dead. For some species like crows and jays, if you find 5 or more, same with songbirds. So, but it's really the hawks and owls, the raptors, and loons as well that you want to report because the state may want to test them. Otherwise, just leave that sick or injured bird alone, and again, nature will take its course with that.
Well, it's an important update, Mark. Thank you very much. And I know you can keep us updated on a monthly basis, and folks can continue to watch and listen to the news for important information about the avian flu. Transitioning now, let's talk about what we're seeing and hearing this time of year, because there's certainly a whole lot of symphonies going on in the morning.
Yeah, it is always an exciting time this time of year. You walk out your back door, and aside from the crazy weather that comes up, there's lots of birds. And of course, this is also Eastern bluebird time. Here's a nice male flying out of a classic nest box. I've got a pair that are using a nest box in my backyard. And you can tell the male because it's got that nice russet breast and a lot of blue. The female is a little bit less colorful, but I can sit there on my porch and watch both of them feeding and picking up nesting material at this point in time. So people should be aware and just keep an eye out because the birds are back and nesting. Maybe a little late in the season to clean out nest boxes, especially if you're seeing activity, because those birds may already be started. But yeah, always great to see them. They showed up in my yard here the past couple of years, and they're back again this year.
Always beautiful to see. Now, the shot of the female that you just showed us, pretty typical. That's where they live. Do we make their habitat for them, these nest boxes?
So they have readily adapted to nest boxes that humans build and that they put up in various different places. Bluebirds like boxes that are out in a field. Again, here's kind of the classic box. It has a 1.5-inch hole on the front of it. It has ventilation at the top, and it's something where you can open the door or the side or the front in order to clean it out every year. So they do nest in the wild in natural cavities. They'll still take advantage of those, but if a bluebird box is put up in the right place, they'll certainly take to that as well.
Mark, how long roughly will they stay in those nest boxes?
So, bluebirds can nest a couple of times a year. So, they'll they'll come back and they'll use boxes that they've used in the past. It takes them a while to build their nest. The fledglings are often maybe a little bit more than a couple of weeks, and sometimes they'll go back and have another brood if they can, if the season's not too long. Similar to their relatives, the robin, which breeds and has multiple broods during the summer months.
Well, certainly the bluebirds are among the most beautiful. They're not the only birds around in the early season. Who else are you keeping an eye on?
Well, here in the backyard, and I'm showing a couple of talking about a couple of birds, and certainly there are many I'll miss, but the song sparrow is one of the first ones that I start hearing singing out in the low shrubs in the yard. A classic little brown bird. This picture doesn't quite show it, but they do have a nice black dot in the middle. And it's a great song to hear early on, with one of the first songs that you may pick up in your yard. If you're near a marsh, you might hear blackbirds, and I've also heard the occasional yellow-bellied sapsucker tapping away. But the song sparrow is one of my favorites. We catch quite a few of them in the summer at our banding station here.
Well, this next species that you have is one of my favorites. I don't see them very often, but when I do, it tends to be in the spring. They're a very strange looking bird for being in our habitat.
Yeah, so this is the American woodcock, or timber doodle. And spring is the time that people often will see them, primarily because the males are doing their very elaborate flight displays. They'll sit out in a field. I've got one displaying right next to us here at the Audubon. They'll do their painting, as it's called, and then they'll fly up in the air and make this twittering sound as they come down, as the air flies over their primaries. One of the reasons you don't see woodcock, this is a sandpiper that feeds on earthworms, is they're highly camouflaged, as you can see here. Once they're done doing their aerial displays and they're out, in the forest, it's difficult to see them unless you almost, come too close and get too close to a nest where you might flush them. A great bird this time of year, something to go out. They display right at dusk, and you can hear them. They'll keep going most of the night.
Now, we're not going to go back to bluebirds, but we are going to touch back again on the nest boxes, because there's another species that you're keeping an eye on that uses nest boxes.
Yeah, and this is one that I love hearing. They show up on a nice April day. The tree swallow. They'll use those same boxes that the bluebirds use, and oftentimes you'll hear them flying and circling around on warm days. Then they might disappear for a little bit if the weather changes, and then they show back up. But a great bird. If you have bluebird boxes up and you don't get bluebirds, and you have some tree swallows that take advantage of that box, just as good, because they're really fun to watch and they eat a lot of insects.
We have a few minutes left. Who are some of the other flying friends that you're seeing or were hearing this time of year, Mark?
So, one species which has been singing quite a bit in our sugar woods, I call this our sugar bird. This is the brown creeper. And, it's kind of in an interesting position in this shot, but it usually creeps up trees just like that, using that bill to probe in between cracks. And it's often the first song that we hear here at the Audubon, a very high-pitched song. And then another one just showed up, which has quite the extensive song, which is also great to hear, is the ruby-crowned kinglet. And you can see this male has that bright tuft of red feathers there that he'll flash during the breeding season to attract a mate. Oftentimes they remain kind of tucked underneath. You don't see them if he's not displaying them. So that's another species that's just showed up and has been singing. We'll move further north. but we get to hear them here in Huntington during this spring season.
A beautiful bird, and one of these days I'll actually see it and it will get crossed off the list. I'm looking forward someday to the ruby-crowned kinglet. We talk about robins year-round, and there's sort of this sense that, oh, well, that's the ultimate spring arrival, and maybe it is. They never really leave, but they're around.
Yeah, so some individuals will stick around through the winter, and we get lots of questions about that because as long as they have food, crab apples or something, some will stick around. But this time of year, we do get a good push of migrants that are coming through, and folks can walk out and see them out on their lawn, feeding, probing for insects. It has been a harbinger of spring for many of us, but, it's when we see them in large numbers as they come through. And then, of course, you get some robins that, want to like the snow, I guess, and want to look like them. I'm joking here. This is a picture from Mary Perrin, who sent this picture of a leucistic robin. We often get these pictures of birds that don't have pigment in their feathers, or maybe only portions of their feathers. So that's a cool bird to see when you get used to seeing lots of robins, to see a robin that's a little bit different.
Great picture, great picture. And if folks have bird-related questions or pictures, you can pass it along to Mark at the address we're about to put up on the screen. It's 255 Sherman Hollow Road in Huntington. Or you can drop Mark an email. That's at the bottom of the screen, mlabar@audubon.org. Send Mark your pictures or your questions, and we'll look for answers on an upcoming edition of Bird Notes. Mark, always great to see you. 30 seconds or less, the hiking trails at the Green Mountain Audubon Center. That's also a piece of spring coming in and hopefully beginning to dry out as we head into May.
Yeah, there's certainly some muddy spots out there, and we're working, we sugar, and so because of that with the tractor. So in fact, I'll be out there working on them today. This is the time for folks to stay off some of the higher elevation, or all of the high elevation trails. But here at the Audubon, the center's still open and folks can come out, and mud boots are probably a good suggestion, but not necessary.
All right, Mark, always great to have you with us, and always great to have you with us as viewers. Once again, thanks for joining us Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit Across the Fence.